I'm Everly Thompson. I turned 32 last spring, and for most of my life, I've known exactly where I stood in my family behind my sister. Sarah, my older sister by 3 years, was the golden child. She got the smiles, the praise, the second helpings, and the better room. She did everything right, at least according to our parents. She married at 24, had 2 boys by 27, baked casseroles from scratch, and sent out Christmas cards in September. And me, I stayed single, focused on my career, rented a quiet apartment across town where no one asked why I still hadn't settled down. I had a 401k, a Roth IRA, and no intention of asking anyone for help. Apparently, those things don't count when you're not wearing a ring. My parents, Diane and Robert, never said it outright, but their questions always carried a weight. Don't you want children before it's too late? Your sister's boys are growing so fast. It's a shame they don't have cousins. You're still in that apartment, huh? I learned to nod and change the subject. I used to think if I worked hard enough, maybe they'd finally see me the way they saw Sarah. But the truth settled in slow like dust. You stopped noticing on the shelves. I wasn't the daughter they bragged about. I was the one they assumed would be fine no matter what. Still, I never complained. I visited on holidays, helped fix the Wi-Fi, brought wine when they forgot birthdays, mine included. And for the most part, I kept my distance. It felt safer that way. I didn't know back then that distance wouldn't be enough. That one day, they'd try to pull me in so tightly I'd barely recognize myself. Sarah's picture-perfect life began to come apart the way fine china does quietly at first, then all at once. Her husband, Michael, had been cheating for years. She found the messages by accident. Or maybe she was finally ready to stop pretending she didn't see what was already there. When she filed for divorce, no one blamed her, not even our parents. Michael disappeared shortly after. No child support. No apology, just gone. Sarah was left with 2 boys, Liam and Noah, and a stack of bills she couldn't carry alone. Our parents were supportive in words, but their savings were tied up in retirement and sentiment. Sarah moved into a 2-bedroom apartment where the boys shared a room and the wallpaper peeled in the corners. I didn't think twice. I paid her attorney's retainer. I covered 6 months of rent when her part-time hours at the community center weren't enough. I even watched the kids a few weekends so she could breathe. I never brought it up, never expected anything back. I loved my nephews. And Sarah, for all her past glory, looked broken like someone who wasn't used to asking for help and hated needing it. Still, I thought maybe now our parents would see the truth. Maybe this time they'd understand I wasn't the one with something to prove. They didn't. Instead, every conversation with Mom began with an update on Sarah's pain, followed by a question about whether I was seeing anyone yet. I kept quiet, helped where I could, told myself family meant showing up even when you were tired of being invisible. But the thing about always being the responsible one is eventually people start assuming your help isn't a gift, it's a given. It was a Wednesday when my mother called. "Everly, honey, we have such good news. Can you come by tonight?" Her voice had a brightness I hadn't heard in months, maybe years. I thought for a second that Michael had resurfaced, that the courts had finally found him, or that Sarah's life had turned a corner. "Is it about the boys or the child support?" I asked. No, even better," she said. "Just come over, your father's already home and Sarah will be here too." I drove across town after work, tired but curious. There was something off about her tone, too rehearsed, too smooth. But I told myself not to overthink it. Maybe for once it really was good news. When I walked into the living room, they were already seated. Dad on the recliner, Mom perched on the edge of the couch, Sarah beside her smiling nervously. On the coffee table sat a manila folder. "There she is," Dad said, standing to hug me, then handing me the folder. "Take a look." Inside was a stack of documents heavy with legal language and real estate logos. At the top, mortgage agreement. "What is this?" I asked. "It's for Sarah's new house." Mom beamed. "We used most of our savings and some of the retirement for the down payment." "Isn't it wonderful?" I blinked. "You bought a house." "Yes," she said. A lovely place. 3 bedrooms, big yard for the boys. They need stability. This apartment just isn't enough. I looked at Sarah, who gave a small nod but said nothing. That's great, I said honestly. The boys will love that. I started to hand the folder back. No, those are for you, Mom said, pushing it toward me again. What do you mean for me? Dad cleared his throat. We've talked about this as a family, and we've decided you'll take over the mortgage. You've been saving for years. You can make the payments easily. Sarah can't afford it, Mom added gently. She's doing everything she can, but the boys need this. The room went silent. I felt every eye on me. You're asking me to pay for Sarah's house, I asked. Sarah still wouldn't meet my eyes. After Michael left, I have nothing, she murmured. I can't give them what they need without help. I looked at the mortgage again. The amount was staggering. I already paid for her divorce, I said quietly. And half a year of rent. I've been saving for 10 years for my own home, sweetheart, Mom said, reaching for my hand. We raised you. We've done so much. Isn't it time to give back? I stood up, heart pounding. You bought a house knowing she couldn't afford it because you assumed I'd cover it. Dad didn't deny it. You don't have a husband or children, he said flatly. I'm not doing this, I said. This isn't help. This is manipulation. I left the folder on the table unopened and I walked out before I could start screaming. I thought they'd cool down. I told myself they'd realize how absurd it all was, that asking your unmarried daughter to pay for her sister's house wasn't something most people would defend. I was wrong. The first call came that Saturday from my cousin Emily, someone I hadn't seen since Grandpa's funeral. April told me what happened. She said, "No hello, no pause. I can't believe you're being so cold." Excuse me, I asked. Sarah's a single mom, Everly. Those boys are your nephews. You're sitting on all that money and won't help. I gripped the counter. Emily, you don't know the full story. I know enough. Family helps family. Before I could respond, she added, Sarah would do the same for you. I almost laughed, bitter and voluntary. No, she wouldn't, I said quietly. You're unbelievable. She snapped and hung up. The text started after that. Then voicemails people I barely knew. Uncle Ron, Jessica, a cousin I hadn't spoken to in years, piling on. The messages blurred together. You're selfish. They raised you. She has children. You don't. What struck me most wasn't the anger. It was the certainty. As if they knew beyond doubt that I was wrong. That because I hadn't built a family of my own, I was now fair game to fund someone else's. The worst came from Aunt Susan, my mom's older sister. She called during dinner. I just want to talk some sense into you, she said in that sugary tone she'd perfected. You're not getting younger, Everly. Who knows if you'll ever have children? At least this way you'd be contributing to your family's future. So because I'm single, I said I owe Sarah a house. Don't be dramatic. They need help. And you're in a position to give it. That night, I blocked every number that had chimed in one by one. If they couldn't respect my boundaries, they didn't deserve my peace. And deep down, I knew something I hadn't wanted to admit. This wasn't about the house. It never was. 2 months passed. I didn't hear from my parents, Sarah, or anyone else I hadn't already blocked. I poured myself into work, walked in the mornings. Let silence become something close to peace. Then the envelope arrived. It came on a Thursday, thick official looking. I thought it was insurance paperwork at first, but when I opened it, my stomach dropped. They were suing me. Diane and Robert Thompson. My parents had filed a formal civil claim. They were demanding $350,000 in reimbursement for expenses related to Everly Thompson upbringing. I read it twice, 3 times. Each line was colder than the last. They listed food, clothing, education. They included a section titled Emotional Support During Adolescence, which I couldn't read without laughing. They even tried to count vacations from when I was 6. and at the end in plain language funds to be used to complete the mortgage on the Thompson property purchased for Sarah Thompson and her minor children. They weren't subtle. They didn't even pretend it was about principle. I called the best lawyer I could find. Laura Peterson met with me the next day. She wore glasses, spoke like she'd seen worse, and didn't blink once while I explained everything. "They have no legal right to your money," she said flatly, flipping through the packet. "Parents are obligated to provide for their minor children. There's no legal expectation of repayment." "So why sue me?" I asked. Laura shrugged. "Pressure tactic. They think you'll give in to avoid court, or they genuinely believe you owe them." I felt numb then, angry, then ashamed for feeling either. Over the next 3 weeks, I gathered everything. Proof of the $7,200 I'd paid for Sarah's rent, the $5,500 check to her divorce attorney bank transfers to my parents. Over the years, $500 here, $1,000 there. Texts from my mother asking for just a little help when Dad's pension fell short. I found receipts I didn't remember keeping. Pulled records from old email accounts. Every line was a memory I hadn't asked to revisit. When the court date came, I wore gray slacks and a blouse my grandmother had given me years ago. I brought only what I needed, and Walter and Ellen, who showed up in quiet defiance of their own daughter. Grandma squeezed my hand. "What they're doing isn't right," she whispered. "But you already know that." Across the aisle, my parents sat with Sarah beside them. She looked anywhere but at me. I told myself to breathe, not to hope. This wasn't about changing their minds. It was about proving mine still mattered. The courtroom was colder than it should have been in the middle of summer. The walls were beige, the carpet thin. I remember wondering who had picked the chairs hard plastic unyielding like they were built to punish waiting. My parents sat on the left. Sarah. Between them, aunts and uncles behind people who hadn't sent me a birthday card in years, now here to support the family. On my side sat just two Grandpa Walt and Grandma Ellen. She wore a brooch I hadn't seen since I was a child. When she leaned over to squeeze my hand, I almost broke. Then the judge walked in. He looked to be in his 60s, gray at the temple's glasses low on his nose. The kind of man who didn't rush to speak because he'd already heard every kind of lie. My father stood first. "Your Honor," he began. "We're not unreasonable people, but we invested our lives, our money, our time into raising Everly. We're only asking for a portion of that back to help our other daughter and her children." The judge didn't blink. Specifically, he said, flipping a page. "What did you spend on her education after she turned 18? Mom and Dad exchanged glances. Dad cleared his throat. "Well, at that time, Sarah had just gotten married. We were helping her and her husband get established." So the judge clarified. "You did not contribute to the defendant's college expenses." "No, Mom," said quickly. "But my mother Everly's grandmother did. And since she's my mother, I'd argue we supported her indirectly." From behind me, Grandma let out the faintest scoff. Laura rose calm, methodical. "Your Honor, we have documentation showing that Ms. Thompson has been financially independent since the age of 18. In addition, she has provided repeated financial support to both her parents and a sister." She handed over the file bank transfers receipts emails. "This includes $7,200 in rent payments for her sister, $5,500 to her divorce attorney, and multiple direct deposits to her parents during times they reported financial hardship." The judge reviewed quietly, then looked up. "So the defendant wasn't receiving support, but giving it correct," Laura said. My mother shifted in her seat. "That money isn't relevant," she argued. "We're talking about the cost of raising her food shelter emotional guidance." "Why exactly?" the judge asked. "Do you need $350,000 now?" Mom hesitated, looked at Sarah. "To help Sarah pay off the mortgage," she said softly. Silence. Even Uncle Ron shifted uncomfortably behind her. The judge turned to Sarah. "Ms. Thompson, do you believe your sister should be responsible for your home loan?" Sarah finally looked up. "She's not married. She doesn't have children." I do, and that creates a financial obligation, he asked. We're family. The judge raised an eyebrow. I'm not married either. Should I pay for my clerk's rent or my baif's children? Sarah blinked, said nothing. The judge turned back to my parents. Did you financially support Everly after she became an adult? We were helping Sarah, Dad repeated. So you prioritized one daughter over another. He said it plainly. No accusation, just fact. They didn't answer. For the next hour, he asked hard questions. Not cruel, but unflinching. Why did they assume I would pay? Why purchase a house they knew Sarah couldn't afford? Why tie help to guilt and guilt to debt? They gave the kind of answers that collapse under their own weight. When we stepped outside, Grandma hugged me first. You were steady, she said. That's more than I can say for anyone else in that room. I wasn't sure if I'd won. Not yet. But for the first time in a long while, I wasn't the one on trial. The verdict came 1 week later. The courtroom felt smaller the second time. Maybe because I was finally breathing in it. The judge didn't waste words. After reviewing the evidence, I find the plaintiff's claim to be without merit. Mr. and Mrs. Thompson, the financial responsibility of raising a child does not entitle you to reimbursement once that child becomes an adult. He glanced down at his notes, then back up. In fact, the evidence suggests Ms. Everly Thompson has already provided significant financial support to both you and her sister. Then, quietly but not softly. Frankly, I find your behavior toward your daughter to be brazen and disappointing. Dismissed just like that. I didn't celebrate. I didn't cry. I just stood there while Laura smiled and Grandma squeezed my arm and Grandpa whispered, "You're free." I thought it was over. It wasn't. A week later, I got a call from Grandma. "Your mother came by yesterday," she said. Voice tired. She asked us to release her inheritance early. For what I asked, though, I already knew. To pay off Sarah's mortgage, she said. I sat down. What did you say I told her we haven't decided who gets what? That the will is ours to manage. Did she get angry? No, Grandma said. She cried. She begged us not to disinherit her. I didn't know what hurt more, that she asked or that she cried over money, not me. Months passed quiet ones. I closed on a small house, nothing big but mine. I painted the kitchen yellow, planted tomatoes, adopted a gray cat that slept beside my laptop every night. Sarah rented out her house, moved back in with our parents. Mom babysat while Sarah worked. Somehow they made it work. I didn't call. I didn't write. Then almost a year after the trial, an email landed in my inbox. No subject line. Just this. We heard you bought a house. Since you now have extra space, we think it would be best if Sarah and the boys moved in with you. It would be much more convenient for them there. Let us know when they can move in. Love, Mom and Dad. I read it twice. I didn't get angry. I just replied, I will not be hosting Sarah or the boys. If you contact me again with these kinds of demands, I will report the harassment to the police. Do not email me again. Then I hit send, blocked the email, and made tea. These days, my house smells like fresh basil and coffee. The cat, marble gray and solemn, sits on the windowsill most mornings watching birds he'll never chase. I painted the kitchen yellow like I always said I would, and the tomatoes out back are finally coming in. It's quiet here. No voices raised, no questions I don't want to answer. Grandma and Grandpa visit often. They bring pie or old newspaper clippings they think I'll like. Grandpa helps with the gutters. Grandma still reminds me to lock my windows at night, even though I've got a security system. They don't talk about my parents unless I ask, and I rarely do. One Sunday, as we sat on the porch swing, Grandma said, Your mother's still talking about you, still telling people you abandoned Sarah. I didn't answer. Your Aunt Susan told her to stop bringing it up at family gatherings. Said, No one wants to hear it anymore. That part made me smile. I'm not naive. I know they still think I failed some unspoken test of loyalty, that I should have stepped up even if it meant laying down everything I'd built. But I also know this. I sleep better now. Sarah, from what I hear, is still living at home, renting out the house to cover the mortgage. The boys are growing fast. I haven't seen them in over a year. Sometimes I wonder what they've been told. Sometimes I wonder if they'll ever reach out, but I don't wait for it. I'm dating someone James kind with a laugh that feels like space being made. He doesn't ask about my family. Not yet. And I don't offer. Some ties don't need explaining. Some ties don't need mending. Every once in a while, I feel that ache of what could have been. If they'd ever seen me as more than spare parts. If love hadn't come with fine print. But I don't regret saying no. Not anymore. Because peace, I've learned, isn't given. Everly Thompson learned that peace is not given but earned through setting boundaries. Despite her family's expectations to fund her sister's life due to her single, childless status, she refused to be manipulated. Facing a lawsuit from her parents demanding repayment for her upbringing, Everly stood firm, proving her financial independence and contributions. The ordeal taught her that love shouldn't come with obligations or guilt. By prioritizing her own well-being, buying her own home, and distancing herself from toxic demands, she found tranquility realizing true family respect doesn't exploit personal achievements, but honors individual choices.
I stared at my reflection in the glass walls of Marcus Bennett's corner office, straightening my blazer one final time before knocking. The prototype designs were tucked safely in my leather portfolio. 3 years of research, countless late nights, and innovations that could revolutionize medical device manufacturing. At 43, this was my chance to finally get the recognition I deserved at Bennett Medical Solutions. "Come in," Marcus called out, his voice carrying that artificial warmth he reserved for meetings he thought were important. I pushed open the door, confident and prepared. This wasn't just another presentation. This was my legacy. "Sarah," he smiled, gesturing to the chair across from his desk. "Right on time, as always." I settled into the seat, noting the slight tension in his shoulders, the way his eyes wouldn't quite meet mine. Something was off, but I pressed forward anyway. I finalized the prototype designs for the micro-precision manufacturing process. I began, opening my portfolio. The initial tests exceeded our expectations. We're looking at a 40% reduction in production costs while maintaining superior accuracy. About that, Marcus interrupted, leaning back in his chair. "There's been a slight change of plans." My hands froze over the documents. Change of plans. He cleared his throat, adjusting his tie, a nervous habit I'd observed over my 8 years at Bennett Medical. "You've done excellent work, Sarah, really excellent. But we're going to be taking the project in a different direction." "Different direction?" I repeated, my stomach tightening. "The test results are perfect. The patent application is ready to file. We're weeks away from. Jason will be taking over the project." The words hit me like a physical blow. Jason Bennett, Marcus's nephew, who had joined the company fresh out of college just 6 months ago. Jason, who spent more time organizing office happy hours than actually working. That Jason. He's been looking for an opportunity to prove himself. Marcus continued, as if that explained everything. He has some fresh ideas about marketing the technology, and frankly, he needs a win. I sat very still, my mind racing. "Marcus, this project requires extensive knowledge of medical device manufacturing. Jason has no experience in." "He's a quick learner," Marcus cut in, his tone sharpening slightly. "And he has an MBA from Stanford. He understands modern business dynamics. An MBA doesn't teach you about micro-precision engineering or medical device regulations," I countered, fighting to keep my voice level. "This technology is complex. The patent application alone requires." "We'll handle the patent filing through the company's legal team," he waved dismissively. "Jason will be the lead on this now. I need you to transfer all project materials to him by end of day." I felt a curious calm settle over me, the kind of calm that comes when you realize someone has just made a catastrophic mistake, but they don't know it yet. "Of course," I said softly, "I'll prepare the handover materials." Marcus beamed, clearly relieved I wasn't going to make a scene. "Excellent. Jason's very excited about this opportunity. He has some ideas about streamlining the design, making it more marketable." Streamlining. The word echoed in my head. 3 years of meticulously engineered precision, and Jason wanted to streamline it. I'm sure he does, I replied, gathering my portfolio. Will that be all? Yes, yes, Marcus nodded, already reaching for his phone. And Sarah? Let's keep this transition smooth, alright? Jason needs this chance to shine. I stood adjusting my blazer again. Don't worry, Marcus. Everything will work out exactly as it should. As I walked back to my office, I passed Jason's desk. He was leaning back in his chair, feet propped up, talking loudly on his phone about some party he'd attended over the weekend. He caught my eye and gave me a smug little wave. I smiled back, polite and professional. What Marcus didn't know, what Jason certainly didn't know, was that I had filed the patent application 3 months ago. Not through Bennett Medical Solutions, but personally under my own name. It was my innovation, developed largely on my own time, using my own resources. Yes, I used the company's labs for testing, but I carefully documented everything, paid for materials, and ensured all work was done outside official hours. I had planned to transfer the patent to Bennett Medical once it was approved. It would have been my gift to the company that had given me my start in the industry, but now things would be different. Sitting at my desk, I opened my drawer and pulled out a small notebook, my project diary. Inside were dated entries detailing every step of the development process, every test, every breakthrough. Most importantly, it documented when and where I'd done the work. It was evidence that this was my innovation, not the company's. My phone buzzed. A text from Marcus's assistant. Project handover meeting with Jason scheduled for 2 p.m. today in conference room C. I took a deep breath and began preparing the handover documents. But these weren't my complete files. No, these were the sanitized versions, the basic blueprints without the crucial innovations that made the technology revolutionary. Jason would get exactly what he deserved, an incomplete project that looked good on paper but would never actually work. At 1:55 p.m., I gathered my materials and headed to conference room C. Through the glass walls, I could see Jason already there, sprawled in a chair, scrolling through his phone. I paused for a moment, straightening my shoulders. This wasn't just about me anymore. This was about every dedicated employee who had ever been passed over for someone's nephew, every innovator who'd had their work stolen, every professional who'd been told to be a team player, while watching others take credit for their achievements. I pushed open the door, smile firmly in place. Hello, Jason. Shall we begin? He looked up, barely concealing his disdain. Yeah, sure. Look, I know this must be awkward for you, but Uncle Marcus thinks I can really take this project to the next level. No hard feelings, right? None at all, I replied, setting down my folders. I'm sure you'll make it your own. For the next hour, I walked him through the sanitized project documents. I watched as his eyes glazed over during technical explanations as he interrupted with improvements that showed his complete lack of understanding. He didn't even notice when I skipped entire sections of crucial data. This all seems pretty straightforward, he declared, closing the folder without really reading it. I've got some ideas about streamlining the whole thing, making it more user-friendly. Maybe add some AI or blockchain or something. I nodded seriously. Sounds innovative. Uncle Marcus says we're presenting to the investors next month. Big meeting, very exciting. But don't worry, I'll make sure to mention your contribution. That's very thoughtful, I said, gathering my materials. I'm sure the investors will be very interested in what you have to show them. As I walked back to my office, I felt surprisingly light. Let them have their moment, their illusion of victory. The real show would begin at that investors' meeting, when they tried to present my patented technology as their own. I spent the rest of the afternoon quietly backing up my personal files, removing any traces of my real work from the company's servers. At 5 p.m. sharp, I shut down my computer and prepared to leave. As I walked past Marcus's office, I could hear him and Jason inside, laughing about something. This is going to be huge, Jason was saying. The investors won't know what hit them. No, I thought to myself as I stepped into the elevator. They certainly won't. That evening, I sat at my kitchen table reviewing the actual patent application. It had been approved just last week. Perfect timing, really. I pulled out my phone and composed a careful email to my patent attorney, explaining the situation and requesting a meeting. The reply came within minutes. Available tomorrow at 9 a.m. This should be an interesting conversation. I smiled, pouring myself a glass of wine. Oh, it would be interesting indeed. Marcus and Jason had no idea what they'd just set in motion. Sometimes the best revenge isn't about causing chaos. It's about sitting back and watching people realize the consequences of their own actions. Tomorrow would be just another day at the office. I would smile, be professional, play along with their plans. But in 4 weeks, at the investors' meeting, everything would change. Let them enjoy their moment of triumph. Let them believe they'd won. After all, the best part of any story is the unexpected twist at the end. The next few weeks at Bennett Medical Solutions took on a surreal quality. I watched from my cubicle as Jason paraded around the office, boasting about his revolutionary project to anyone who would listen. He'd set up shop in a newly renovated corner office, my old project space, where he spent more time ordering expensive furniture than reviewing technical documents. My meeting with the patent attorney had gone exactly as planned. "They can't present this technology without your permission," she had confirmed, reviewing the paperwork. "The patent is ironclad. You developed it independently, documented everything meticulously. If they try to claim it as company property, they'll be in for quite a surprise." I kept this knowledge close, wearing it like invisible armor as I navigated the office politics. Marcus had been avoiding me, sending emails instead of having face-to-face conversations. When we did cross paths, his smile was too bright, too forced, as if he were trying to convince himself he'd made the right decision. 3 weeks before the investors' meeting, I overheard Jason in the break room, surrounded by his usual crowd of admirers. "The old design was way too complicated," he was saying, waving his hands dramatically. "I've simplified it, made it more modern. Uncle Marcus says it's exactly what the company needs." I poured my coffee slowly, listening as he continued. "We're expecting at least $50 million in initial investment. This is going to change everything." He caught my eye and smirked. Sometimes you need fresh eyes to see the real potential in things. I smiled pleasantly. "How's the patent application coming along?" I asked, knowing full well the answer. Jason's confidence wavered slightly. "Legal's handling all that. Boring paperwork stuff, you know how it is." Of course, I nodded. "Those applications can be quite complex. All those technical details, proof of innovation, demonstration of unique development." I let the words hang in the air before walking away, leaving him looking slightly unsettled. That afternoon, Marcus called an all-hands meeting to discuss the upcoming investor presentation. The conference room was packed, everyone eager to hear about the project that had become the talk of the office. I sat quietly in the back, observing. "This is a pivotal moment for Bennett Medical," Marcus announced, standing at the front of the room. "Jason will be presenting our new micro-precision manufacturing process to our top investors. This technology will revolutionize our industry." Our technology. The phrase made my teeth clench, but I maintained my composure. "We're projecting first-year revenues of $100 million, Jason added, clicking through his PowerPoint slides. The graphs were flashy but meaningless, all style, no substance. "The patent application is in process, and we're looking at international markets." I noticed Sandra from legal shifting uncomfortably in her seat. She'd been with the company for 20 years and had handled all our previous patent applications. I wondered if she tried to tell them they couldn't find any application in process. After the meeting, Sandra caught up with me in the hallway. "Sarah," she said quietly, glancing around to ensure we were alone. "There's something odd about this project. I can't find any of the original development documentation in our files." I gave her a measured look. "Have you mentioned this to Marcus?" She nodded. "He said Jason has all the necessary paperwork." "But Sarah," she hesitated. "The way they're rushing this through, it doesn't feel right." "I'm sure they know what they're doing," I replied neutrally. "Jason has some very modern ideas about streamlining processes." Sandra didn't look convinced, but she let it go. As she walked away, I felt a twinge of sympathy. She was good at her job, dedicated to doing things properly. The coming storm would likely shake her faith in the company's leadership. 2 weeks before the investors' meeting, the office was buzzing with preparations. Marketing had created elaborate presentation materials, all prominently featuring Jason's name. The prototype, my prototype, sat in a glass case in the lobby, though Jason had insisted on adding some cosmetic changes that actually made it less efficient. I received an email from Marcus. "Sarah, we need the complete technical specifications for the investor presentation. The files you provided seem to be missing some key components." I replied promptly. I provided all company-related documentation during the handover. If you need additional technical details, I'm sure Jason has developed his own specifications with his improvements. No response. A week later, I was working late when Jason stormed into my office, his usual smugness replaced by barely contained panic. "The prototype isn't working," he blurted out. "We tested it today and nothing makes sense. The precision rates are all wrong." I looked up calmly. "Have you reviewed the technical specifications?" "Of course I have," he snapped. "But something's missing. You must have kept some of the documentation. The investors are expecting a working demonstration next week." I leaned back in my chair. "I provided everything related to the company project during the handover, Jason. If you've made improvements, perhaps you should review those changes." He ran his hands through his hair, frustration evident. "Look, I know you're probably still upset about losing the project, but this is bigger than that. This is about the company's future. I'm sure you'll figure it out," I said smoothly. "After all, you have an MBA from Stanford. And as you said, sometimes fresh eyes see things differently." He left my office looking distinctly unsettled. Through the glass walls, I watched him rush to Marcus's office, gesturing animatedly as he explained the problem. The next morning, Marcus called me into his office first thing. He looked tired, the confidence of the past few weeks replaced by barely concealed worry. "Sarah," he began, trying to maintain his authoritative tone, "we need to discuss the project. There seem to be some gaps in our documentation." "Oh," I kept my expression neutral. "The prototype isn't performing as expected. Jason thinks there might be some crucial information missing from the files you provided." I tilted my head slightly. "I provided all company-related documentation as requested. Is there something specific you're looking for?" Marcus's jaw tightened. "Sarah, please. This presentation is crucial for the company. If you're withholding information out of professional disappointment, we need to address that." "Professional disappointment?" I repeated softly. "No, Marcus, I'm not withholding anything. I simply provided what belonged to the company. Nothing more, nothing less." He stared at me for a long moment, and I could see the first flickers of real concern in his eyes. "The investors are expecting a working demonstration next week," he said finally. "They're coming specifically to see this technology." I stood up, smoothing my skirt. "Then I suggest Jason focus on making his improvements work. Will there be anything else?" Marcus shook his head, already reaching for his phone, probably to call an emergency meeting with the development team. As I walked back to my desk, I could feel the tension in the office rising. The confident buzz of the past few weeks had been replaced by an undercurrent of panic. Jason's corner office had become a war room, with engineers coming and going, trying desperately to make the prototype work properly. But they couldn't. Not without the key innovations I developed and patented. Not without the crucial details that existed only in my personal files, protected by law as my intellectual property. The investors' meeting was now just 5 days away. I sat at my desk, calmly working on other projects while chaos swirled around me. Sometimes the best revenge isn't about taking action. It's about watching others realize the consequences of their own choices. And this show was just getting started. The morning of the investors' meeting arrived with an atmosphere of barely contained panic at Bennett Medical Solutions. I walked into the office exactly on time, wearing my best charcoal suit and carrying a slim briefcase containing one very important document, my patent certificate. The main conference room had been transformed for the presentation. Fresh flowers adorned the tables, expensive catering was being set up, and a sleek prototype display stood at the front of the room. Through the glass walls, I could see Jason pacing back and forth, his tie askew, rehearsing his presentation while Marcus watched with visible anxiety. Sandra from legal caught my eye as I passed her office. She looked troubled. "Sarah," she called softly. "Do you have a minute?" I stepped inside, closing the door. "What's wrong?" "I've been searching everywhere for the patent documentation," she said, her voice low. "There's nothing, no application. No records, nothing in our system at all. I tried to tell Marcus, but he keeps saying it's handled." I nodded sympathetically. "That must be frustrating." "The investors will want to see proof of intellectual property protection," she continued. "Without it," she shook her head. "I'm sure it will all become clear during the presentation," I replied, checking my watch. "Speaking of which, we should head to the conference room." The investors began arriving at 9:30 a.m. serious men and women in expensive suits, representing some of the largest medical technology venture funds in the country. I recognized several faces from industry conferences, including Michael Chen, known for his brutal directness in questioning new technologies. Marcus greeted everyone with forced cheerfulness, while Jason stood nearby, still muttering his presentation points under his breath. The prototype sat silent in its display case, a beautiful shell hiding its fundamental flaws. At 10 a.m. sharp, Marcus called the meeting to order. I took a seat at the back of the room, quietly observing. "Ladies and gentlemen," Marcus began, "thank you for joining us today. Bennett Medical Solutions is proud to present a revolutionary advancement in medical device manufacturing technology. Leading this innovative project is our rising star, Jason Bennett." Jason stepped forward, clicking to his first slide. His presentation was polished, full of buzzwords and market projections. But I could see Michael Chen frowning as Jason glossed over the technical specifications. "Our micro-precision manufacturing process will reduce production costs by 40% while maintaining superior accuracy," Jason declared, repeating my original findings verbatim. "The patent is pending, and we're targeting international markets." "Excuse me," Chen interrupted, leaning forward. "Can you explain exactly how the system achieves this precision? The technical documentation you provided seems incomplete." Jason faltered slightly. "Well, through our proprietary process." "Yes, but what process?" Chen pressed. "Your materials don't detail the actual innovation." Marcus stepped in smoothly. "We're keeping some technical details confidential until the patent is secured. I'm sure you understand." "Actually," Chen replied, "I don't. Our firm doesn't invest without full technical disclosure and clear IP protection." "When was the patent filed?" The room grew quiet. Jason looked to Marcus for help, but Marcus was suddenly very interested in his tablet screen. "Perhaps," I said, standing up, "I can clarify the patent situation." All eyes turned to me. Marcus's head snapped up, his face paling slightly. "Sarah," he warned, "this isn't the appropriate time." "Actually, it's exactly the right time." I opened my briefcase and withdrew the patent certificate. "The technology you're presenting today was patented 3 months ago. Here's the certificate of registration." I handed copies to the investors. "You'll notice the patent holder is listed as Sarah Mitchell, not Bennett Medical Solutions." The room erupted in murmurs. Chen studied the document intently while other investors flipped through the pages with growing interest. "This is a misunderstanding," Marcus stammered, standing up. "Any work done by employees belongs to the company. Except," I continued calmly, "I developed this technology independently, on my own time, using my own resources. I have extensive documentation proving it was created outside of company hours and with my own equipment. The patent office has already validated my claim." Jason had collapsed into a chair, his face ashen. Marcus was frantically whispering with Sandra from legal, who looked like she might be sick. "So," Chen said, his voice cutting through the chaos, "Bennett Medical Solutions is presenting technology they don't own, claiming a patent they don't have, and promising production capabilities they can't deliver." "That appears to be the case," I replied. "Ms. Mitchell," Chen turned to me, "would you be interested in discussing this technology with our investment team? Under different circumstances, of course." I smiled politely. "I would be happy to schedule a meeting." The next few minutes were a blur of activity. Investors gathered their materials and began filing out, many stopping to exchange contact information with me. Marcus stood frozen at the front of the room, watching millions in potential investment walk out the door. As the last investor left, I packed up my briefcase and headed for the exit. Marcus finally found his voice. "Sarah, wait," he called out. "We can fix this. Whatever you want. Promotion, raise, profit sharing." I turned back to face him. "You had a chance to value my contribution, Marcus. Instead, you gave my work to your nephew because he needed a win. Now you can both watch as I take my innovation elsewhere." "You can't do this to the company," Jason protested weakly. "I'm not doing anything to the company," I replied. "This is simply the consequence of your own actions. But don't worry, I'm sure you'll figure something out. After all, you have an MBA from Stanford." With that, I walked out of the conference room, leaving them to deal with the wreckage of their own making. Sometimes the best revenge isn't about destroying someone else's success. It's about claiming your own worth and letting others face the reality of their mistakes. The week following the investors' meeting felt like watching dominoes fall in slow motion. I had cleared out my desk that same afternoon, submitting my resignation effective immediately. Marcus tried desperately to stop me, even offering to make me co-head of research and development, but it was too late. The trust was broken, and we both knew it. By Monday morning, the story had spread throughout the medical device industry. My LinkedIn inbox was flooded with connection requests and messages from companies interested in my technology. The patent revelation had done more than just embarrass Bennett Medical. It had shown the entire industry that I was someone to watch. I received a text from Sandra in legal. Board called emergency meeting. Marcus trying to explain how he let a patented technology walk out the door. Not going well. I wasn't surprised. The board of directors had always been focused on innovation and intellectual property. Losing my technology wouldn't just cost them the immediate investment opportunity, it would set their development timeline back by years. Michael Chen called me personally that Tuesday. "I've reviewed your complete technical documentation," he said. "This is even more impressive than I initially thought. Would you be interested in heading up your own company? We have some ideas about market positioning." 2 days later, I sat in a sleek conference room at his firm's offices, discussing terms for a startup focused on medical manufacturing innovation. The investment package they offered was more than I had ever imagined. Full funding, technical support, and a controlling interest in the company. "We've had our eye on this sector for a while," Chen explained, "but we needed someone who truly understood both the engineering and the market. You've proven you have both." As we shook hands on the deal, I couldn't help but think about Marcus and Jason. Through industry contacts, I heard that Jason had been quietly moved to a minor role in marketing, his corner office now occupied by someone else. Marcus was facing intense scrutiny from the board, his judgment questioned not just for losing the technology, but for his nepotism and poor management decisions. A month after the investors' meeting, I received an unexpected email from Marcus. "Sarah, I owe you an apology. I made a terrible mistake in not recognizing and valuing your contribution to Bennett Medical. My decision to give your project to Jason was not just unfair, it was foolish. The board has asked for my resignation, effective next month. I suppose I'm learning the same lesson about consequences that I taught you, albeit unintentionally. Best wishes with your new venture, Marcus." I didn't reply. Some bridges, once burned, shouldn't be rebuilt. My new company, Precision Medical Technologies, opened its doors 3 months later. The irony wasn't lost on me when several of my former colleagues from Bennett Medical applied for positions. I hired the ones who had always done good work, including Sandra from legal. She now heads our intellectual property department, ensuring that every innovation is properly protected. Last week, I saw Jason at an industry conference. He hurried past my company's booth, avoiding eye contact. Our prototype was drawing crowds, and several major manufacturers were already discussing licensing agreements. The technology that Marcus had so casually handed away was now revolutionizing the industry, just not for Bennett Medical Solutions. As I stood at the podium later that day, accepting an innovation award for our contributions to medical device manufacturing, I thought about that afternoon in Marcus's office, when he had so casually dismissed years of my work. Sometimes the best success stories start with someone underestimating you. Sometimes it takes someone pushing you aside to make you realize it's time to step up. I dedicated the award to all the overlooked innovators who never got credit for their work. The audience applauded, but a few people shifted uncomfortably in their seats. Good. Maybe next time they'd think twice before assuming they could take credit for someone else's brilliance. My patent certificate hangs on the wall of my new office, not as a reminder of revenge, but as a testament to knowing your worth and standing your ground. Success, it turns out, is the best response to those who undervalue you. And sometimes the greatest victory isn't in watching others fail, but in soaring past them as you achieve everything they thought you couldn't. I stared at the email lighting up my phone screen, my coffee growing cold beside me. Meeting with Director Matthews, 9:00 a.m., mandatory. The timestamp read 8:47 a.m. 13 minutes notice for a meeting that would change everything. I'm Margaret Wilson, 55 years old, and until that moment, I was the senior contracts manager at Elevate Technologies, one of Boston's fastest growing software companies. For 11 years, I had managed our most crucial client relationships, particularly the Harrison Miller account, a $50 million annual contract that represented nearly 30% of our company's revenue. The morning sun filtered through the floor-to-ceiling windows of our modern office as I made my way to James Matthews' corner office. James, our Director of Client Relations, had joined the company just 8 months ago. At 38, he was part of the new wave of leadership brought in to modernize our approach to client management. I knocked on his door, straightening my blazer out of habit. "Come in, Margaret." His voice carried that artificial warmth I'd grown to recognize. James sat behind his massive desk. Beside him stood a young woman I'd never seen before. She couldn't have been more than 30, dressed in the latest corporate fashion, tablet in hand. "Please take a seat," James gestured to the chair across from him. "This is Alexandra Porter. She's joining us from Tech Solutions International." I nodded politely, the knot in my stomach tightening. I'd been in this industry long enough to know when something wasn't right. "Margaret," James began, folding his hands on the desk, "you've been with Elevate a long time. You've seen the company grow, adapt, change. And now, we're entering a new phase of that evolution." I kept my expression neutral, even as my heart started to race. I knew it was coming. I'd seen it happen to others my age, but knowing didn't make it any easier. "The industry is changing rapidly," he continued. "We need to stay competitive, agile, innovative. Which is why we're restructuring the contracts division. Alexandra here will be taking over as Senior Contracts Manager, effective immediately." The words hit like physical blows, but I didn't flinch. 11 years of negotiating high-stakes contracts had taught me how to maintain composure under pressure. "I see," I said quietly. "And my position?" James shifted slightly, the first crack in his professional facade. "We're offering you a transition to an advisory role. Reduced hours, of course, but it would allow you to support Alexandra as she takes over the accounts." I almost laughed. They wanted me to train my replacement, to hand over 11 years of relationships, knowledge, and trust that I'd built from the ground up. "The Harrison Miller contract is up for renewal in 3 weeks," I pointed out. "They're particularly sensitive to changes in account management." James waved his hand dismissively. "Alexandra has extensive experience in client relations. She'll handle the transition smoothly. Besides, it's time we brought some fresh energy to that account." Fresh energy. The euphemism hung in the air like stale smoke. "To be frank, Margaret," James leaned forward, his voice dropping, "the industry is evolving faster than some can keep up with. We need someone more adaptable, less set in their ways. I'm sure you understand." Adaptable. The word stung more than it should have. I'd adapted to every technology change, every market shift, every new demand over the past decade. I'd learned 3 different contract management systems, mastered digital collaboration tools, and built our entire client portal from scratch. "Of course," I replied, my voice steady. "When would you like me to start the handover?" James smiled, clearly relieved I wasn't making a scene. "Alexandra will shadow you this week. We'd like a full transfer of all account information, contact lists, and pending negotiations by Friday." 5 days. They were giving me 5 days to transfer 11 years of knowledge. "The severance package is generous," he added, sliding a folder across the desk. 6 months' salary, continued health benefits through the end of the year. All we need is your signature on the transition agreement." I picked up the folder without opening it. "I'll review it and get back to you." "Today, if possible," James pressed. "We'd like to announce the change to the team this afternoon." Of course they would. They probably already had the announcement drafted. As I stood to leave, Alexandra stepped forward, her smile bright and rehearsed. "I'm really looking forward to working with you this week, Margaret. I'm sure I can learn so much from your traditional approach." Traditional, another carefully chosen word that meant outdated, obsolete, dispensable. I smiled back, but it didn't reach my eyes. "I'm sure you will." Walking back to my desk, I felt the eyes of my colleagues following me. Word traveled fast in open office spaces. They knew something was happening, even if they didn't know what. I sat down at my computer, the familiar hum of the office continuing around me. Emails kept arriving, calendar notifications popped up, but all I could think about was the Harrison Miller contract sitting in my secured drawer. The contract that James and Alexandra knew nothing about. The contract I had spent months restructuring with Harrison Miller's legal team. the contract that contained very specific clauses about account management and service guarantees. Clauses that would become very interesting in about 3 weeks. I opened my desk drawer and pulled out my personal notebook, the one where I kept detailed notes of every meeting, every conversation, every promise made to our key clients. Information that wasn't in any official system or shared drive. As I flipped through the pages, a plan began to form. James thought I was dispensable, replaceable. He thought client relationships could be transferred as easily as email passwords. He was about to learn how wrong he was. I pulled up my email and began composing a message to Marcus Harrison, CEO of Harrison Miller Technologies. We had built a strong relationship over the years, based on trust, reliability, and mutual respect. He had my personal cell number and had used it more than once during critical negotiations. Subject: upcoming contract renewal. Important discussion. Dear Marcus, I hope this email finds you well. Given our upcoming contract renewal discussions, I believe we should schedule a private meeting to discuss some important developments at Elevate that may impact our partnership. Best regards, Margaret. I hit send and waited. Marcus was known for his quick responses to critical communications. Sure enough, within 5 minutes, my phone buzzed. Call me, his text read. Now. I glanced at James' office. He was showing Alexandra around, probably giving her the grand tour of the department she was about to modernize. I grabbed my phone and headed to the building's rooftop garden, my usual spot for confidential calls. Margaret, Marcus answered on the first ring. What's going on? Your email sounded ominous. I took a deep breath. Marcus, I've just been informed that I'm being transitioned out of my role. They're bringing in someone new to handle the accounts, including Harrison Miller. Silence filled the line. Then, they're what? A younger manager from Tech Solutions International. They want me to train her this week and hand everything over by Friday, 3 weeks before our renewal. Are they insane? Marcus's voice had that edge I recognized from tough negotiations. The board is meeting next week to review the renewal terms. We specifically included those service continuity clauses because we trust you, Margaret. You built this partnership. I know, I said quietly. I also know that Clause 15.3 requires a minimum 90-day transition period for any change in senior account management, with board approval from both companies. Marcus laughed, but there was no humor in it. They didn't read the fine print, did they? Apparently not. What do you need from me, Margaret? I smiled, looking out over the Boston skyline. Nothing yet. Just keep next Monday's board meeting on your calendar. I have a feeling it's going to be interesting. After ending the call, I returned to my desk. Alexandra was there, sitting in my guest chair, tablet ready. Margaret, I thought we could start the handover now. Maybe you could walk me through your filing system. I sat down, knowing how she'd already made herself comfortable in my space. Of course. Happy to help. Though I should mention, have you had a chance to review the Harrison Miller contract yet? The current version, honey. She blinked. Oh, I'm sure I'll get to all that this week. James said the renewal is pretty straightforward. Did he? I started pulling up files on my computer. Well then, let's start with the basics. Though I should warn you, my filing system is rather traditional. Alexandra nodded enthusiastically, missing the glint in my eye. James had no idea what was coming. But by this time next week, he would learn that experience isn't just about age. It's about knowing exactly which strings to pull when everything falls apart. And I had spent 11 years weaving those strings into a very sturdy safety net. The next morning, I arrived at the office early, well before the usual crowd. The quiet of the empty workspace felt different now, no longer peaceful, but charged with anticipation. I had spent most of the night reviewing the Harrison Miller contract, not because I needed to. I knew every clause by heart, but to ensure my plan was airtight. Alexandra arrived at 9:15, 15 minutes late for our scheduled handover meeting. She breezed in with a coffee cup from the expensive cafe downstairs, apparently unconcerned about her tardiness. Sorry, she chirped, settling into the chair beside my desk. The line was crazy. But I got you a coffee too. She placed a cup on my desk, clearly proud of her thoughtfulness. I glanced at the cup. I don't drink vanilla lattes. I'm allergic to vanilla. Oh, her face fell slightly. James mentioned you were particular about things. I bet he did. Shall we continue with the handover? I pulled up our contract management system. Today we should cover the special terms and conditions for our top 5 clients. Actually, Alexandra interrupted. James wants me to sit in on the tech strategy meeting this morning. He thinks it's important for me to understand the bigger picture. Can we do this after lunch? I smiled slightly. Of course. Though you should know, Harrison Miller's COO usually calls around 11 a.m. on Tuesdays to discuss their weekly technical requirements. Alexandra's eyes widened. Today? Nobody told me about that. It's not in any calendar. Robert, their COO, prefers to keep these calls informal. He's rather old school that way. I paused. But I'm sure you can handle it. Just remember he's very particular about understanding the technical aspects of our service implementation. Technical aspects. Alexander's confidence wavered for the first time. I thought this was about contract management. Oh, it is. But with Harrison Miller, everything is connected. That's why they insisted on having a manager who could bridge the gap between technical specifications and contract terms. I started gathering my things. Well, you should get to your strategy meeting. I'll be in the archive room if Robert calls. I left her at my desk, looking considerably less sure of herself than when she arrived. By 11 a.m., I was in the archive room, purposely away from my phone, when I heard the commotion. Margaret. It was Susan from reception, slightly out of breath. Robert from Harrison Miller is on the line. He's asking for you specifically. Alexandra tried to take the call, but he's demanding to speak with you. He's pretty upset. I checked my watch. I'll take it in the conference room. When I picked up the phone, Robert's voice boomed through the speaker. Margaret, what the hell is going on over there? I just spent 10 minutes talking to someone who doesn't know the difference between API integration and a mobile app. I apologize, Robert. I'm being transitioned out. Alexandra is taking over the account. Silence. Then the hell she is. We didn't agree to this. Does this have something to do with your email to Marcus? Perhaps we should discuss this offline, I suggested calmly. I believe you're having dinner with Marcus tonight. Robert caught on quickly. Yes, I am. Well, I'll make my feelings about this transition known through the proper channels. Just be available if we need you. Always. By the time I returned to my desk, Alexandra was gone. A message from James blinked on my screen. My office. Now. I took my time walking to his office, stopping to get a cup of tea from the break room. When I finally entered, James was pacing behind his desk. Want to explain what happened with Robert? He demanded. I settled into the chair across from him. What seems to be the problem? The problem? James ran a hand through his hair. The problem is that Robert Stevens just spent 10 minutes yelling about incompetence and threatening to escalate to their board. That does sound serious. This is exactly why we need a smooth transition. You need to handle these calls until Alexandra is up to speed. I tilted my head. But I'm just an advisor now, remember, with reduced hours. Besides, Alexandra assured me she was ready to take over. She has extensive experience in client relations. Isn't that right? James's face reddened. This isn't a game, Margaret. Harrison Miller is our biggest client. Yes, I agreed. They are. Then help Alexandra. Show her everything she needs to know. I pulled out my copy of the transition agreement you'd given me yesterday. Actually, I've been reviewing this. The terms are quite interesting. You're offering 6 months' salary for 11 years of service, with a non-compete clause that would prevent me from working anywhere in the industry for 2 years. I met his eyes. That seems rather unbalanced. James' expression hardened. That's standard for executives at your level. Is it? And does the board know about this transition? About replacing the manager of our largest account 3 weeks before their contract renewal. The board trusts my judgment on personnel matters. Fascinating. I stood up. Well, if there's nothing else, I should get back to training Alexandra. Though I have to warn you, my traditional methods might take longer than a week to transfer. Just fix this, James snapped. I don't care how. As I walked back to my desk, I saw Alexandra huddled with James's assistant, looking distressed. She quickly straightened up when she saw me. Margaret, that call didn't go quite as planned. So I heard. Would you like to review the technical specifications now? She glanced at her watch. I actually have a lunch meeting with James and some of the team leads. Maybe this afternoon. Of course, I smiled. Though you should know, The Harrison Miller project team usually sends their weekly status report around 2 p.m. They'll probably have questions about the new development phase we discussed last week. Alexandra's face fell. Development phase? Don't worry, I assured her. I'm sure James can help you handle it. He did say you were perfectly qualified for this role. The rest of the day passed similarly. Alexandra bounced between meetings with James and the team leads, clearly trying to absorb as much information as possible. But 11 years of complex client relationships, technical knowledge, and carefully nurtured trust couldn't be transferred in a few rushed sessions. At 4:30 p.m., my phone lit up with a text from Marcus Harrison. Dinner with Robert was enlightening. Board meeting moved up to Friday. Expect formal communication tomorrow. I allowed myself a small smile. The pieces were falling into place. As I packed up for the day, Alexandra stopped by my desk one last time. Her earlier confidence had been replaced by barely concealed panic. "Margaret," she started, her voice lower than usual. "Maybe we could grab dinner, go over everything in more detail. I feel like there's so much I still need to know." I almost felt sorry for her. Almost. "I'm sorry, Alexandra. As James explained, I'm moving to reduced hours. I'm not available for after-hours meetings anymore." I paused. "But I'm sure you'll figure it out. After all, it's important to be adaptable." The look on her face as I left was worth every moment of yesterday's humiliation. But this was just the beginning. Tomorrow, James would learn that some things in business can't be rushed, some relationships can't be transferred, and some people are not, in fact, dispensable. Wednesday morning arrived with a storm, both literally and figuratively. Rain lashed against the office windows as I sorted through my emails, each one bringing news that made my smile grow wider. The first came from Harrison Miller's board secretary. Emergency board meeting scheduled for Friday, 10 a.m. Attendance mandatory for all senior account representatives. The second was from our own board secretary. Urgent meeting requests from Harrison Miller leadership. All relevant parties to attend Friday, 10 a.m. The third was from James. My office. 8:30 a.m. Urgent. I took my time finishing my morning tea before heading to James' office. When I arrived, he wasn't alone. Alexandra sat in one chair, looking like she hadn't slept. A man I recognized as Michael Porter, our legal counsel, occupied the other. "Close the door," James snapped. I did so, then took the remaining seat, folding my hands in my lap. "Good morning, everyone." "Did you know about this?" James thrust a paper across his desk. It was a formal letter from Harrison Miller, outlining their concerns about the management transition. "About what specifically?" I asked, skimming a letter I helped Marcus draft 2 days ago. "This." James jabbed his finger at a paragraph. "The contract clause requiring 90 days notice and board approval for any change in senior account management." I put on my best surprise expression. "Oh, that clause." "Yes, of course. It's been part of our agreement since the last renewal." "And you didn't think to mention this?" "I assumed you reviewed the contract thoroughly before deciding to replace me," I said mildly. "Given that Harrison Miller is our largest client." Michael Porter cleared his throat. "The clause is quite clear. We're in breach if we proceed with an immediate transition." "Can't we just delay the transition?" Alexandra spoke up. "Give them the 90 days notice now." "The renewal is in 3 weeks," James growled. "They could walk away entirely." "That would be unfortunate," I'd observed, "especially since their business represents almost a third of our annual revenue." James's face had taken on an interesting shade of purple. "Margaret, you need to fix this. Call Marcus. Tell him you're fully supportive of the transition." I raised an eyebrow. "But that would be dishonest, wouldn't it? And our ethics policy strictly prohibits misleading clients." I turned to Michael. "Isn't that right?" The lawyer shifted uncomfortably. "She's correct. Given the sensitivity of the situation, any miscommunication could worsen our position." "Position?" James's voice rose. "What position?" "This is an internal staffing decision, which directly impacts a $50 million contract," I pointed out. "A contract that, I should mention, includes several other interesting clauses about service continuity and account management expertise." The room fell silent as the implications sank in. Finally, Michael spoke. "James, I need to review the entire contract if there are other relevant clauses." "The contract is available in the secure system," I offered helpfully, "though some of the technical addenda are quite complex. I'd be happy to walk you through them." "Do it," James ordered. And Margaret, you're not going anywhere until this is resolved. I stood smoothing my skirt. Of course not. I take my responsibilities very seriously, even the traditional ones. As I led Michael toward the contract review room, I heard Alexandra's panicked voice. James, I didn't know it would be this complicated. The rest of the morning dissolved into chaos. Michael spent hours reviewing the contract, his frown deepening with each page. Alexandra tried desperately to prepare for Friday's board meeting, but every attempt to understand the technical aspects of our service agreement left her more confused. Around noon, my phone buzzed with another text from Marcus. Just reviewed the transition documents they sent over. Very enlightening. Friday will be interesting. I allowed myself a small smile. Marcus had always appreciated the detailed notes I kept about every promise, every commitment, every special arrangement we'd made. Notes that were now proving very valuable. At 2 p.m., James called another emergency meeting. This time, our CEO David Chen was present via video conference, his usually calm demeanor replaced by obvious concern. Someone explained to me, he began, how we managed to overlook contractual obligations with our largest client. James started to speak, but David cut him off. And why am I just learning about this transition now, 2 days after it was announced? David. James tried again. I was streamlining the department. Margaret's methods are outdated, and Alexandra brings fresh. Stop. David's voice was sharp. Margaret, is there any way to salvage this? All eyes turned to me. This was the moment I'd been waiting for. The contract is quite clear, I said carefully. Any transition requires 90 days notice and board approval from both companies. Additionally, the renewal terms we've been negotiating include specific requirements about technical expertise and service continuity. Requirements that Alexandra can meet, James insisted. I turned to Alexandra. Could you explain to everyone how our API integration with Harrison Miller's legacy systems works? The one we custom built for their European expansion. Alexandra's face went pale. That wasn't covered in the handover yet. No, I agreed. We haven't had time to cover many things, like the specialized reporting system we developed for their compliance requirements, or the emergency protocols we established after last year's security audit. David's sigh crackled through the speakers. James, my office, 5 p.m. Margaret, please prepare a complete summary of our obligations under the Harrison Miller contract. And he hesitated. Perhaps you should attend Friday's board meeting to help smooth things over. I nodded graciously. Of course, I'm happy to help in any way I can. As we filed out of the conference room, James grabbed my arm. You planned this, he hissed. You deliberately set us up. I gently removed his hand. No, James. You did that all on your own when you decided I was dispensable. I straightened my jacket. Now, if you'll excuse me, I have a board meeting to prepare for. Walking back to my desk, I felt lighter than I had in days. Friday was approaching, and with it, the moment when everyone would understand exactly why experience matters. James thought he could discard me like outdated technology, but he was about to learn that some things can't be upgraded with a newer model, especially not when the original version holds all the passwords to the system. Friday morning arrived crisp and clear. I dressed with particular care, choosing a perfectly tailored charcoal suit I'd been saving for special occasions. As I pinned my silver hair into its usual elegant twist, I smiled at my reflection. Today would be memorable. The Harrison Miller board meeting was scheduled for 10 a.m. at their downtown headquarters. I arrived at 9:30, nodding to the security guard who had known me for years. In the lobby, I found James and Alexandra already waiting, both looking tense. Margaret, James acknowledged stiffly. He'd avoided me since his meeting with the CEO 2 days ago. Alexandra couldn't meet my eyes. She'd spent yesterday desperately trying to understand the technical aspects of our service agreement, making increasingly panicked calls to our development team for explanations. At 9:45, we were escorted to Harrison Miller's executive floor. The boardroom was impressive, all mahogany and leather, with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city. Marcus Harrison sat at the head of the table, flanked by his board members. Robert Stevens, their COO, sat nearby, shooting daggers at Alexandra with his eyes. Our CEO, David Chen, had flown in for the meeting. He greeted Marcus warmly, though the tension was visible in his shoulders. Our own board members filled the remaining seats, including Michael Porter, who was still clutching the contract documents he'd been reviewing obsessively. Shall we begin? Marcus's voice cut through the murmurs. "We're here to discuss some concerning developments regarding our partnership with Elevate Technologies." James straightened in his chair. "Mr. Harrison, if I may." "No, you may not," Marcus cut him off. "First, I'd like Margaret to explain exactly what's been happening." I stood slowly, gathering my notes. "Thank you, Marcus. As you all know, I've managed the Harrison Miller account for 11 years. On Monday, I was informed that I would be immediately replaced by Alexandra Porter, with a 1-week transition period. Without consulting us, Robert interjected. "Yes," I continued. "The decision was made without regard to the contractual requirement of 90 days notice and board approval from both companies." "And what about the technical expertise requirements?" Marcus asked. I glanced at Alexandra, who seemed to shrink in her chair. Perhaps Alexandra could explain her understanding of our custom API integration. The silence was deafening. Marcus turned to David. "Your company has provided excellent service for years, largely due to Margaret's expertise. She understands our systems, our needs, our goals. Now, 3 weeks before our contract renewal, we learn you're replacing her with someone who doesn't even understand the basics of our integration." David shot a dark look at James. "This transition was not handled appropriately. We acknowledge that." "Not handled appropriately?" Robert laughed harshly. "It's a breach of contract. Section 15.3 clearly states." "If I may," I interrupted smoothly, "there might be a way forward that benefits everyone." All eyes turned to me. "The contract renewal includes expanded services for Harrison Miller's European operations. It would require someone with intimate knowledge of both the technical infrastructure and the compliance requirements. Someone who has successfully managed similar expansions." Marcus leaned forward. "Someone like you?" "Perhaps," I smiled slightly. "Though not as an Elevate employee." The room went still. James's face drained of color as he realized what was coming. "I've been offered a position with Global Solutions Partners as their Director of Strategic Accounts," I revealed. "They're very interested in expanding their European presence." David sat up sharply. "Global Solutions was our biggest competitor." "Of course," I continued, "I'm bound by certain non-compete clauses in my severance agreement. The one James asked me to sign." I paused. "Oh wait, I never signed it, did I?" James looked like he might faint. Marcus was trying to hide a smile. "Are you suggesting you might take our business to Global Solutions?" "I would never suggest such a thing," I replied diplomatically. "I'm merely pointing out that my expertise and relationships will be available elsewhere. Unless," David prompted. "Unless we discuss a different arrangement," I turned to face our board members. One that values experience over adaptability. The next hour was intense. Our board members huddled in one corner, speaking in urgent whispers. David pulled James aside, their heated discussion visible through the glass walls. Alexandra slipped out quietly. Nobody noticed her departure. Finally, David returned to the table. "Margaret, what exactly are you proposing?" I laid out my terms clearly. "I'll establish a new division, Strategic Client Services. I'll report directly to the board, not to James. I'll handle the Harrison Miller renewal and expansion, with full autonomy to build my team. And of course, appropriate compensation adjustments. And a board seat," Marcus added unexpectedly. "We'd feel more comfortable with Margaret having a voice in company decisions." David looked at his board members, who nodded slowly. The math was simple. Lose a $50 million contract and potentially more to a competitor, or give me what I deserved all along. "Agreed," David said finally. "We'll have the paperwork drawn up immediately." James stood up abruptly. "This is ridiculous. You can't let her blackmail the company like this." "James," David's voice was ice. "You're suspended pending a review of your management decisions. Please clear your office by the end of the day." As the meeting wrapped up, Marcus caught my eye and winked. He played his part perfectly, though the threat of taking their business elsewhere had been genuine. Back at the office, news spread quickly. I walked to my desk, head high, as whispers followed me. James was nowhere to be seen, though I heard the sound of boxes being packed in his office. A week later, I sat in my new corner office, reviewing resumes for my team. The Harrison Miller contract renewal had been signed, including expanded services that would double its value over the next 3 years. Global Solutions had sent me a gift basket with a note saying their offer still stood. I kept it displayed prominently on my credenza. Alexandra had transferred to a junior position in marketing. Sometimes I saw her in the break room, where she carefully avoided eye contact. James had been asked to resign after a review revealed other questionable decisions. Last I heard, he was working for a small startup, reporting to a director younger than Alexandra. As for me, I ran my fingers over the new nameplate on my door. Margaret Wilson, Executive Director of Strategic Client Services, Board Member. Not bad for someone supposedly too traditional to adapt. A knock at my door interrupted my thoughts. It was David. Margaret, got a minute? The board wants your input on our new diversity and inclusion initiative, particularly regarding age discrimination in management decisions. I smiled, picking up my tablet. Of course, I might have some thoughts on that. As I followed him to the boardroom, I reflected on the past 2 weeks. James had thought he could push me aside, replace me with a younger model, discard my experience like an outdated phone. Instead, he learned an expensive lesson. True value doesn't have an expiration date. Sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is simply step back and let people face the consequences of underestimating you. And me? I was just getting started. After all, experience only gets better with age.